This is PT Pro Talk, the podcast for physical therapists who want to improve their clinical skills and be more successful. I am Mariana Parks, physical therapist and your host, and today I interviewed Dr. Jason Silvernail to discuss military leadership and personal development. Dr. Silvernail is board certified in orthopedics, fellowship trained in manual therapy, and he is on active duty in the U.S. Army at the rank of colonel. We talked about the military PT career, day-to-day as a PT colonel in the Army, developing leaderships in the military, and how to apply leadership skills to a PT career. If you find this information valuable, I encourage you to subscribe to our channel, click on the notification bell to stay updated, give us a thumbs up, and share with other clinicians you feel may benefit from this conversation. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you enjoy the show. PT Pro Talk is only possible with the support of the forward-looking and innovative companies like Systems for PT, the Do Anything, Anytime EMR. Systems for PT develops systems for clinics so you can focus on your patients. Go to systemsforpt.com to schedule a demo today.
Looking for the highest quality equipment for your clinic? Turn to Fitter First. Our wobble, rocker, and slant boards are all assembled in North America to meet the demands of a busy professional clinic. Designed to adjust in seconds and made from the highest quality materials. Get the best Canadian-made rehab and balance products for your clinic. Order online for your clinic or for your clients. Ground shipping anywhere in North America. Visit fitterone.com. That's FITTER, the numeral 1.com.
Hi, Jason. Welcome to PT Pro Talk. How are you today?
Hey, I'm great, Mariana. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So let's get started just telling a little bit about your background and how did you get to where you are right now?
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for your kind invitation. Really excited to talk to you and your guest tonight. So my name is Jason Silvernail. I'm a physical therapist and have been so for over 25 years. I'm a colonel in the U.S. Army, where I currently serve as the consultant and surgeon general for physical therapy. So I'm the senior physical therapy officer in the Army. I have board certified in orthopedics. I've got my DPT. I was certified strength and conditioning specialist, and all those fancy letters for people who care about that stuff. Fellowship trained in manual therapy. And, because I'm in the Army, in addition to being a PT, one of the things I have to say is everything I talk about with you and your guest tonight is my personal opinion and commentary. It does not reflect the official policy or position of the United States Army, the Department of Defense, or the U.S. government. And with that very exciting disclaimer, I am ready to take your questions.
The famous disclaimer.
Let's get rolling, right? You got to keep the lawyers happy,
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm interested on your career and in your career in the Army. I feel like I am curious. I don't know if other people are curious. How does it work being in the Army for so long? So what are your roles and how does it work?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, I love military medicine in general, and I love military PT in particular. I don't know. And your guest your audience may agree. I think physical therapy is the best job in medicine for a lot of reasons. And I just love being a PT in the military. Now, for me, I enlisted in the Army when I was 17, right before I was about to graduate from high school. And between that and ROTC and other things, I've been in the Army my entire life. So I have 32 years time in the Army now, which sounds crazy when I say it that way. It's true. I've been very fortunate to go lots of cool places and do lots of cool things. But the great thing about military medicine in general is that we just don't have to deal with a lot of the sort of unnecessary nonsense that you sometimes find in clinical practice and in medical care, at least in the United States. And that's what I know best. That's what I'll talk about a little bit. So things like insurance companies and pre-authorizations, we don't deal with any of that. Things like rules about who you can see and when and for how long. And so let me put it to you this way. So look, if you're in the U.S., you're a PT, and a lot of other countries move in the same direction too. You have a bachelor's degree, and then you went and got a doctoral or clinical doctorate in physical therapy. And you learned how to be a doctor in our field. And I think a lot of times you find when you come out is that the medical system hasn't caught up to that yet. And it's still very restrictive of who you can talk to and who you can see and what you're allowed to do. And we don't have any of those problems in the military. In fact, for 30 years, we have been able to practice at a level that aligns with our training. And normally what you have is a practice level that's here, right, in the commercial system, and you have an expertise and training level here. So what are you going to do with that difference, right? It's pretty frustrating at times. We don't have to worry about that in military medicine. So, I mean, there's a lot of talk, and people will talk about, oh, it's government healthcare and all that kind of stuff. But our government healthcare is a lot more free market than the current system we have, at least in the US. And it's great to be able to do things like order imaging studies and refer patients to other providers and, prescribe a limited medication list and order laboratory tests and do other things that our patients need us to do to be safe and healthy without having to stop and go get a permission slip from someone else. And so I've had a really fun time being able to practice in that environment. And once you do that for a while, the people that you're around, they get really good at their job. And I'm very fortunate in the military, some of the most talented and skilled clinicians, you got to figure you're operating at a high level for a long period of time. That can't fail to build tremendous skills and expertise in the people that do that. And we're lucky to have that in military medicine. And that's the healthcare side. On the Army side, I've done a lot. I've been a lot of places, done a lot of things, and happy to take questions. I highly recommend military medicine, whether you're a government civilian or whether you're in one of the uniformed services in the U.S. military for PT people, because it's just so much better than trying to practice on the outside with all the silly rules and restrictions.
Yeah, it's more effective for sure.
Yes, that too.
And so on the military side, because I had a few guests before, we discussed a little bit about the healthcare side. And how about the military side? So do you have a lot of trainings, and how does it work, that day-to-day routine?
Yeah, well, it really kind of depends on your role. For the most part, early in your career, when you're a relatively junior officer, you're doing a lot of what you might imagine people in the commercial PT realm are doing or in the civilian sector are doing. I saw a lot of patients for a lot of years in PT clinics, and I was a full-time clinician for most of my career. And you don't have to lose that or give that up when you're in the military. I think the interesting thing about healthcare is that most healthcare occupations, in my view, are not careers. They're jobs. And I don't mean job is less than career. I mean, a career has a vertical. It has a series of steps that you can climb, and each step ideally means you're more competent and successful. Ideally, I know it doesn't always work that way. The world's not perfect. But healthcare occupations are not like that. They're jobs. There isn't a vertical, right? So you start off doing your job. Let's say you're a physical therapist or an optometrist or a general surgeon. You can do that job, or maybe you can be like the department chief, or maybe somebody up in your hospital, but that's it. There's one or two steps. And in my view, that is not a vertical progression. That's not a career. It's a job. And there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great job, right? But I think that it's helpful for people to understand that. Now, that's the healthcare side. And the military side, being a military officer really is a career. There is a series of vertical steps that you go through. You have to be promoted to each level. You have different responsibilities and roles and opportunities at each level. And when I started out, I was like a full-time clinician. When I was a more junior officer, as I was a mid-grade officer, I became like a department chief and did a couple of other unusual military things, like deploy to a combat zone, or be involved in hospital policy, or be involved in Army training and policy development, or be a commander, or be an inspector general, where you go around and make sure that everything in the Army is progressing the way it should, all those kinds of things. And then at the level where I'm at as a colonel, I'm an executive leader. So I have the typical, 50 to 70, feels like 80 more weeks than not, work weeks. And I do a whole bunch of stuff that involve policy making, decision making, conflict management, strategic decisions about the movement of the Army and of Army medicine and of the physical therapy community now, that because I'm a consultant right now, and in trying to steer my hospital that I currently work at in the right direction. So there's the job side, which is the healthcare side, and the career side, which is the military officer side, that affords you a lot of opportunities to go and do different things. But I think a lot of people in medicine, they're not used to the career aspect of it. They're used to kind of like the job aspect of it, right? And it's really an exciting way to have two things at once, to have kind of two roles, right? I've got my job, which is as a DPT, and then I've got my career, which is as a military.
So like in the beginning, when you said that you're a junior, you used to see a lot of patients like a normal full-time clinician?
Oh, yes. So we have things like productivity requirements and coding and billing requirements. We have those too. We're not immune to those because we're in the government service. There's actually just fewer rules about how we accomplish them. So we're able to hit our targets without being forced to sometimes compromise care quality. And I know that's a big concern in the civilian market. But I just don't think that's a real big issue on the government side of it. But absolutely, you start your career and you spend most of your career really doing a lot of hands-on patient care.
And that's what I was going to ask. As you progress in your career, do you do less work as a clinician and more like admin stuff?
Yes. Yes, that is typical and normal, but you don't have to do it that way. So it's important to me to maintain my clinical skills. I'm board certified and fellowship trained. I have a lot of strong clinical background. So it's important to me to make sure every job I take, I still stay engaged in the clinic. As busy as I am now, I was just in clinic this morning, and I still see clinic one day or half day a week every time I can, right? And that gives me an opportunity to stay connected to what's happening, in the clinic and in a clinical environment, which gives me great insight into what my hospital and what Army medicine needs to do, as well as I think it's a question of credibility. I think when people in a hospital or an organization or people in my community in physical therapy in the Army, they see this person that's supposed to be supporting them, they want to know it's somebody who's in the trenches with them too. And I'm suffering through the difficulties and the electronic medical record and hitting the productivity marks, and like I'm in all of that stuff, right? I'm in all of that stuff. I don't do the same percentage of patient care as a more junior person, but I do still stay engaged with it, and that's a great part of the career aspect of it. Is you could stay connected to the clinical practice of it, and you don't have to give that up.
And it's good that you're aware of the problems that they have as well.
Yes, 100%. I think you're spot on. I think too many people, they get to a point where they're providing leadership at a higher level, maybe a more strategic level, and they think that's higher up, when actually it's just further away from the action, right? And so instead of saying that there are people below me, I feel like there are people who are more forward than me, more closer to where the action is, which is patient care and making things happen in the military and in military medicine. And I'm further back away, but I have to be aware of what's happening here so I can help make the right decisions to support those people.
Exactly. And so how does it work like a normal week for you? Like, what are the things that you do?
Yeah. So let's see. This is a Tuesday right now. My schedule for Tuesday. So I wake up at 5 a.m. and I exercise in the morning here. Today I was pulling my sled behind the house. Part of the Army combat fitness test is a test exercise called the sprint, drag, carry. You have to sprint back and forth. You have to drag a sled that simulates dragging a person out of combat to save them. You got to carry heavy kettlebells as you run back and forth and all that stuff. So I was doing that behind my house. I got a shower. I tried to catch up a little bit on email once I finished with that. And then I drove to work. And at work, I led a meeting in the morning. And then I went to clinic the whole part of the morning. And then I left clinic and I was in either a meeting or a work group in the afternoon. And then I came home and then I just took a late meeting on Teams, a few minutes ago. And then I finished an assignment that was due, in a policy sense. I finished this. I finally made that deadline. And then I quickly refreshed my browser and jumped in here to be on a podcast with you. And this weekend, I was finally able to submit an academic paper for publication that I've been working on back and forth with reviewers on. So I'm excited about that and hope that goes forward. And that's a pretty typical day for me. Like it starts at 5, and if I'm done with work related things by 8, that's a pretty good day.
Yeah, a lot of different hats. You are all over the place.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Awesome. And I was looking at your social media content, and you talk a lot about leadership and all of those things. And is that directly related to your day-to-day activities, right?
100%. Well, look, one of the things we do in the military is we train people to be better leaders. We build leaders. And that's really a part of the career aspect of things, right? In order to get promoted, you've got to demonstrate better leadership and more effective leadership. And, the Army is an organization like every other organization of humans, right? And, sometimes people maybe that you don't think are the best get promoted, and sometimes amazing people don't get promoted. And that sometimes that just happens. But the Army overall is a really fair place. It's a place where it's very close to being good meritocracy, where your merit determines how high you go. It's not 100%. There are exceptions, but I think it's better than most any other organization in that way. And a big part of people's ability to move up in their career on the career side has to do with their ability to learn and demonstrate positive leadership behaviors and mindsets. And I spend a lot of time on my social media accounts, which hopefully you throw a link to in the show notes, of helping people develop those things better, helping people develop their leadership behaviors and mindsets so that they are more effective and better at leading others and developing themselves.
Yeah, so that I saw a lot of things you're talking about the leadership behavior. Just curious, on your career, what would be your next step?
Yeah, so I'm currently a deputy commander for the hospital, and now I'm also the deputy commander. So I'm the number 2 leader at the medium-sized hospital I'm at now. And I just got a promotion. It's weird to say it a promotion because it doesn't come with any more money. I just got a next position being the deputy corps chief for the Army Medical Specialist Corps. So we have the Army. We have Army medicine underneath that, and Army medicine is divided into corps. You get the medical corps, where our physician colleagues are, the nurse corps, where our nursing colleagues are, that kind of thing. There's several more of them. The corps that I'm in is called the Medical Specialist Corps. It has occupational therapists, physical therapists, dietitians, and physician assistants in it, those 4 groups. And I was fortunate to be selected to be their deputy corps chief, so I'll travel to a new place next spring, in the spring of 24, and I'll go and serve them in that role. And then that will pretty much finish me out, or very close to finishing me out in the Army, and I'll retire right around 36 total years or so. Doesn't seem
That's
like
very
that
cool.
long. It goes by fast.
Congratulations.
Thank you. It goes by fast.
And so what do you think were the things that helped you get up there, progress through your career that you said that what are the behaviors, or like how did you evolve through the years to be in that position that you are right now?
That's a great question. I wish more people would see it that way, right? And so one of the things I like about the Army is the Army is very deliberate in teaching people how to lead others and make things happen. And the Army has a system of leadership they call the Leadership Requirements Model that talks to you about exactly the kinds of things you're supposed to be, to know, and do to be an effective leader. And I find that many of our folks, as they move up, sometimes they lose sight of that, and they don't kind of remember what's in the manual, so to speak, right? And so it's important for all of us to read the manual periodically, and that's especially an important one. But when I talk to people who are the junior or mid-grade level leaders, I think there's kind of, in addition to being aware of what the Army Leadership Requirement Model is, I really want them to do 3 things consistently well. And the first thing is to develop sincere expertise in their field. I need them to be experts at what they do, and be experts at how the Army and about how medicine does things. So let's think about for a moment, like you're a physical therapist somewhere, you're listening to this podcast. How can I develop expertise in my field? The first thing is follow the marks of expertise that your profession uses. Academically, specialty certification, that kind of direction, but also understand not just the physical therapy world, but the wider world of medicine. I think that oftentimes people in health occupations, they really get sort of stovepiped or locked into just their part of medicine, and they lose sight of how what they do fits into the cohesive whole of medicine, right? So how does medicine manage things like safety problems? How does it monitor clinical care quality? How do we address quality and safety problems in medicine? Fortunately, as I move up, I've been in different leadership positions in the hospital where you have to know that the two primary high-vol facility structures in the hospital are the elevators and the HVAC, and you have to know how often they go out and that kind of stuff. So you'll learn a lot of that kind of stuff, but also it's just helpful to have a wider sense of how medicine works. And I think often PTs, they're like anybody else. They don't often know enough about medicine in general to know how what they do fits into that cohesive whole. And that's a big part of expertise in your field, and that's the first one. And the second thing I like to work with people on is a problem-solving focus. And I want people to be very, very interested in solving problems, not in describing problems, not in complaining about problems, but in solving them. And we do need to complain about them, because complaining about them, the emotional response we have to an issue, that tells us what to value. And we cannot make good decisions without our emotional responses, right? So people with damage to their brain in the areas that process emotions can't make decisions, right? And so that's a huge part of putting us in the right direction. And so we need to be upset about something, and we need to be able to describe the problem. But more importantly, we need to be able to fix it with a solution that a lot of people can agree on. And so I really want our junior level and mid-grade leaders to think about, how can I solve this problem? So you're somebody listening to this podcast, you're like, okay, how can I develop this problem-solving focus? The first thing is, when you bring an issue or a problem to your supervisor or to peers or other people where you work, do you bring a solution along with that? Do you select a solution along with that? Are you interested in getting to a solution there, or are we just kind of talking about how bad the problem is? And so that problem-solving focus, I think, is really important. And the third thing I want people to focus on is an external orientation, a non-self orientation. So it's like this. I walk into the morning and I walk into a big room. I walked into a big room this morning where I led our hospital's morning reports, a whole bunch of people in that room. I'm sitting at the head of the table today, and I think to myself, what do these people need from me? And how can I give it to them? Not how can I explain why what they want is wrong, not how can I just do what I do and they have to accept me or not, but how can I deliver on their expectations of me? And I'm thinking about how I appear to them. I don't think about it in terms of trying to preserve my reputation. I think of it in terms of how can I be useful and effective to other people. I think a lot about what I offer other people and what they expect of me. And I ask myself whether or not I'm delivering. So for me, as you move up and you try to develop your leadership, I think these three things are pretty important. Develop expertise in your field, which includes understanding how things work in the wider industry that you're in. Develop a problem-solving focus on solving issues rather than describing them, and have an external orientation. Really think hard about what other people need from you and how other people see you and how you can deliver on what their expectations are. That external orientation, I think about that in the morning when I walked in. I think about it with the admin support specialist at the desk. I think about it with my commander who I work for. I think about it from you, from the person interviewing me. I think, what do you need from me and how can I give that to you? And so you and I talked a little bit about those things so I could understand better what your needs were and how I could better meet them. And that's the kind of external orientation I'm talking about. I think whatever you think about leadership, those three things will take you pretty far.
And I think it's interesting when you said have a broader view about your field, and you are probably in touch with more other healthcare professionals, and that helps your vision. I'm trying to translate that to a PT practice. So I'm just thinking here while you were talking about it. So like if, as you said, like when you have this job, you don't have a career per se, if you're working as a PT in a private sector. And the leadership, when you talk about leadership, I think about the clinical director, that's the one more on the day-to-day. Do you have any, in your experience, how do you think that could translate to every PT that's working in a clinic on the day-to-day?
Most of my time was spent either as a staff doctor in a PT clinic or as a service or department chief. So I'm glad you asked that because I know exactly how to approach it. So let me put it this way. A couple assignments ago, I was the department chief of physical therapy at the Department of Defense's largest hospital. I mean, think about it for a minute where you are and how many visits a month your clinic does. The clinic network I was in charge of did 12 to 15,000 visits a month. That's a big place.
Oh my.
There are bigger places.
Yes.
I'm not saying I'm the biggest, but that's a lot of visits and that's a lot of locations. I had a lot of people. I had to think to myself, man, I got all these locations spread across the city, including one in this really big hospital. How am I going to get my arms around this and figure out how to be effective? And the first thing I thought to myself is, who are my most important customers? And I'm not talking about my boss, right? I'm talking about my customers. And I thought to myself, okay, when it comes to people who get referrals for PT, who's the number one? So I asked my clinical operations people who do the spreadsheets and stuff. I love those folks. They're very helpful. And they said, okay, well, most of your referrals come from family medicine. Got it. So I figured out who the chief of family medicine was and who the chief nurse of family medicine was. And those are two of my most important customers. I went to meet them. I told them my name. I gave them my cell phone number, my personal cell phone number, and said, I'm here to support you. How is physical therapy doing in meeting your needs? Anything you need me to improve on? Is there anything that I'm doing well that you need me to continue? This is my cell phone. Call or text me anytime I can help. And then the next after that was orthopedics. So I had to see the chief of orthopedics and the chief nurse at ortho. And I said, how are we doing? Right? And he had some feedback for me, as they often do. And I say, no problem. I got you. Right? We are going to solve these issues and work it out ourselves. I intuitively understood that conflict between me and my customers was a loser. It's a losing deal. I'm not here to compete with my customers. I'm here to deliver for them. And so I really had to change that kind of relationship a little bit and be more in a service role to my customers. So I think wherever you are, whatever you're doing, and I'm not talking about your boss, you have probably 3 to 5 most important customers. These are people you are accountable for delivering results for. And I'm not talking about the people who write your annual evaluation, right? Now that might be, so let's say you're in a PT practice somewhere. Who's your biggest referral source? Who's a referral source you know well? Who's a person in your community who understands the value of what you do and can help you get your word out? Maybe you've got a patient that comes in and is doing so well and has had their life changed so much for the better by PT. I know we've all got those folks. I know if you're listening to this right now, you're probably thinking of somebody right now who this is, right? Is that somebody that you can tap into? And that person becomes a great marketing person, not only for physical therapy in general, but for your practice. And those are examples of some of the customers that I'm talking about. And so when I focused on really, really delivering for my customers and seeing myself through my customers' eyes, I really started to do a lot better on average. And some people might say, well, why do you call them customers? You guys are all in the government. They're not paying you. I said, oh, no, it doesn't work like that. Like, I think the money part of it is the least important part. It's the service connection that matters. I'm responsible for serving those people. So they're my customers. And I'm trying to do the best I can to meet them where they are and deliver for their needs and over-deliver them even. Years ago, when dinosaurs roamed the earth, I was in a Army unit. So you don't just work in hospitals in Army medicine. Sometimes you work at Army combat units, and I've worked in many combat units. And I got to this combat unit, which is about 3,000 people total, and it's divided in groups, and each of the groups is something called a battalion. And those battalions each have a physician assistant. Most primary care in the Army is provided by PAs who are amazing. And I went to visit all the PAs because I intuitively knew that is like the primary care manager for that group of people. That's a super important customer for me. And 3 of the 4 were really excited to see me. Hey, thanks, welcome. What can I help you with? Another guy, he wasn't having it. He's like, hey, I don't really know what you want from me. I don't know why you're here. I'm busy. I got clinic. Do you need something? I'm like, hey, no, man. I'm just here to see how I can help you. Yeah, it's fine. I don't really use a lot of PT. I don't really need you guys. It's cool. I'm like, oh, okay. Well, here's my card. Here's my cell number. Call anytime you need anything. And I just kind of let him do his thing, right? And so I didn't spend any time talking to somebody who was already a no. I spent time talking to his colleagues and peers who were at yes. And I over-delivered for them repeatedly. And so he kind of got wind of this over time. And then he had a tricky patient he needed help with. And he called me. And he was like, hey, I know we haven't talked in a while. I thought maybe you could help me. I'm like, yeah, man, what do you need? I'm there. And I dropped what I was doing and I over-delivered for that guy in a big way. And that just sort of broke open the positivity part of our relationship at work. And he and I were able to do a lot of cool things together. We did a lot of amazing stuff together in that unit. And, we even got pictures together from deployment. It was great. But that to me is an example of feeling like you yourself are in a position of serving other people. And how can you meet their needs?
And I think that's a very different mindset of, dealing with rejections and criticism and being there humble and open and willing to serve. And I think sometimes people that want to be leaders, that's not how they think about it or how they approach or how their mindset.
I agree.
Right?
They feel like they're the ones that are in charge now and people should do what they want. They feel like they're, it's funny. I say, for years I worked in all these Army clinics and I thought I'm going to be a colonel one day and then I'm going to do it my way. And then I realized when I was a colonel, that it won't work doing that, right? You still have to work with people and find a consensus way and find ways to help people help themselves. And one of the things I want people to think about when it comes to customers is that if you really take care of your customers and you're popular with your customers at your organization, in your business, you're untouchable. Untouchable. So I have had, like everybody, I've had some bad bosses in the past or some people that didn't like me, right? There's not many, there's a few, right? And one of them was this chief of orthopedics many years ago. He just did not like me. He didn't like PT. And most of the time we have a great relationship with our orthopedic colleagues, but sometimes they don't think all that much of us at times. And we just kind of have to roll with that. We're used to that at times for a small number of those folks. And he just didn't like me at all, didn't want to deal with me, nothing like that. So instead of spending my time kind of banging my head on the wall, I started walking around to all the clinics he would offer there, and I started finding the staff orthopedic surgeons, the individual surgeons. And I introduced myself. Hey, I'm the new chief of PT. Here's my business card. Here's my phone number. How are we doing supporting you guys? Is there anything you need? And at first they were all taken aback, like, who's this guy, right? But a couple of them brought up a couple of issues. I'm like, yeah, I'm sorry if that's happening. Let me get back to you. And I got back to them personally, like within 24 hours. And, a couple months goes by and I'm seeing clinic with them in their clinics for the total joint guys who were having some trouble with PT access. So I said, why don't I just come do clinic with you? He's like, you probably can't afford to. I said, of course I can. I can do anything you need me to do. What would help you be more effective? I'll go do it. And that's what I did. And then I went to hand clinic, right? And I went to all of those things in the orthopedic world. And even when the chief of ortho didn't like me, his surgeons loved me because I was a great teammate and I was humble, right? And I didn't throw my rank around, I didn't throw my title around. And I was just saying, how can I help you be more effective? How can I help you in patients? And then it came time for my annual performance report. And he didn't like me so much, but all his people loved me. So I was untouchable, right? He couldn't write something bad even if he wanted to. So one of the things I talk to junior people about is say, don't be afraid of getting a bad boss. Be boss proof. And you can be boss proof by having your customers love you and adopting a mindset of serving others.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Very interesting. Your mindset and how you can change people around you by doing that and being that mindset, because you're never you're not gonna please everybody. It's gonna always have someone that don't like you. Doesn't matter what you do. So if you learn how to deal with the others, so you can win them over on your team and show that you're there to help and serve, eventually that one or two that don't like you, they will surrender.
It's hard to dislike somebody who's always helping you. Have you noticed that? Yeah. It's hard to dislike that. And so I think you do have to do it in a sense of humility and with a sense of service. It's not something that can be manipulated, because you can't you can't sustain the fakery that long.
Yeah.
It has to be sincere, right? And if it's not sincere, people will notice it and it won't go your way. But if you stay positive and you adopt this mindset of serving others, you will be surprised how far that gets you and how much it acts to develop your own character and your own ability to be effective at different levels as an organization as you go on.
So what changed since the beginning when you said that you thought about one day I'm going to be a colonel and do everything the way I want to getting there? So how that transformation on your mindset happened?
It was slow. I would like to tell you that I just read a book or something and it happened, but it wasn't like that. It's like people will tell you I'm a pretty opinionated guy, but I don't need to have my way and I don't have to be right. I want to voice my opinion. I want the group to consider it, but also we need to have a consensus solution together to solve problems. If you want to go fast, this is a saying, if you want to go fast, go by yourself. If you want to go far, go with a group. And if you really want to achieve really good things in life, no matter whether that's business or personal or whatever, you have got to have a group of people around you that is moving in the same direction as you are. And I really realized, by the time I got to be a mid-grade leader, I can't just tell people what to do. I have to let them have a role in the process. And I have to work with them and we have to build a consensus together. And sometimes it looks different, right? I was a physical therapy service chief many, many times at different places. And exactly how the clinic was run varied each time. It wasn't the same because I was the same. It changed because of who was there and whose ideas we worked with in a consensus way, right? We can't always do everything by democracy, right? If you're in charge, you still have to make a decision. But it's incumbent on you to involve people and give them autonomy in their work. One of the things that makes people satisfied at work isn't how much you pay them, although that is part of it, but it's their sense of autonomy and freedom to get their work done and their sense of feeling like they're respected at their workplace. And I really try hard where I am to show respect and courtesy to everyone I talk to, no matter what their role is, and to make sure everybody has the autonomy and freedom to get their work done the way they think is best while helping their customers.
And I saw that you said you had a couple of videos about building extraordinary machines. Is that part of the process?
Yeah, no, I think that's part of it.
Empowering people.
Yeah, I do. I do. I think, and I use the Fiona Apple song "Extraordinary Machine" as an example of how to develop a sense of reflection in yourself, right? And so if I try to sing or recite the lyrics, I know I'll get them wrong. But basically, she's talking about the fact that she's in this conflict with her partner, and he doesn't change. He always does the same thing, right? And she said she can't stop changing all the time, which is why she makes more progress than he does, right? And so she also talks about people who are trying to tell her how she should be. And she hears them, but she doesn't take their advice. She knows she has to manage that herself with her ability to reflect on herself and make progress. So it's a great song in general, Fiona Apple, "Extraordinary Machine." But if you listen to it and you think about it in terms of how you can be a reflective person and how you can sort of push out unnecessary or unhelpful advice from other people, focus on yourself and what you need to do to improve, you will be surprised how far you can go.
Very true. And Jason, what would be an advice that you would give to clinicians that are starting their careers as thinking about everything we just talked about?
Yeah, so I would say that one of the things that I get to do a lot is I get to help sort of junior or mid-grade level people balance their personal life and their professional life. Because very often early, all of our people, these are very, very high-performing people. So if you're a taxpayer, you should know we're working pretty hard over here and we're spending your money well. And we are being as effective as we can. And they're so focused on their professional goals. Sometimes they lose sight of their personal goals. They pick their head up in their late 20s or early 30s and realize, I'm not making progress on my personal life the way I am on my professional life. And why is that? And how do I need to change? I talked a couple of years ago with one of our officers who was in his late 20s. And he called me up and said, "Hey, sir, I need to get out of the Army." And I said, "What's going on, man? Is everything okay?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "Here's the thing." And he told me the story. And he was from a large city. And the Army was just sending him to sort of more rural places. In the Army, in the active component, you move every 3 years or so, right? So it's a lot of moves. I've been a lot of places. You're always picking yourself up and moving. And he said, "Look, I'm from a big city. I want to get married and have a family. And I cannot find a girl to connect with to start that family who's a city girl like I need to connect with. And the Army, I've tried, but it's just not working." And I thought to myself, here's a guy who's got the right attitude. He understands that life success is not just about your job. It's about what your personal and family goals are too. And I've run into a lot of young people in our field who put 100 points of effort into managing their professional life and 5 points of effort into managing their personal. And then they sort of hit a wall at some point and realize they're not on track to get what they want. And then like, oh my gosh, what have I done? And how can I get reoriented, right? So I'm not a life coach, but I can give people some advice as to how to reorient some of their priorities. So my best advice for you, if you're out there as a clinician, please do pursue expertise in your field. Please do pursue an awareness and knowledge of other things in your industry, in our case, medicine, that is not strictly speaking physical therapy, right? One of the things that you can work on is you can understand how the medical system handles safety and clinical safety related events. So you can go to the Health and Human Services and you can look up communication and issue resolution frameworks like team steps or like Lean Six Sigma, and you can learn how medicine writ large solves quality problems. And that's intimately connected with what we do every day in PT, and it gives you a wider view of what medicine looks like. So start with your expertise in the field, but also think carefully about what your personal goals are, right? And so if life is more than your work, life is more than your job. It's your health. And it's about relationships with important people in your life. And don't neglect those, and don't think those things will always be around. Make sure you're putting time and effort into building and developing those things. If your goal is to find a partner and start a family and move down the road on that, there's like a time frame you got to work with on that, right? Yeah. Like the nature provides us a time frame, right? Where that is a safe and effective and healthy thing to do as human beings, right? So we ought to think about where we are and what our goals are and how can we achieve those things, right? And that doesn't matter who we are or where we're working, right? And so I would encourage people to make sure that don't put work-life balance to the side and go all in on your job 100% for too long. You might pick your head up and find you're not where you want to be on the personal side too.
Yeah, it's very hard to balance because when you put a lot of effort in one thing, you neglect the other and vice versa. So you have to be always looking for that. And when you say that you're
in the Army, I'm sorry, let me add, can you mind if I add one more thing? We move a lot in the Army. Here's what I tell people. Like, you take an assignment for 3 years that is really going to help your career and put tons of time and effort into that. But you know what? The next time, take a job that's going to be better for your family. Spend more time with your partner, with your children, with, however you conceive of that. Maybe it's with hobbies or whatever. Find a way to rebalance that periodically. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. You don't have to pick. There are times in my life when I have been super professionally focused and 100% focused on being the best that I can be in my field. And there are times when I've really been in a position to put more time and effort into family and personal life and been able to relax or downshift a little bit. And if you don't do that, you will burn out.
Yeah. And when you say that you're a consultant, is like you are offering a service to other physical therapists that's outside the military. It's just you with your experience helping other
I may in the future, but right now, while I'm in the Army, I'm the consultant to the Surgeon General for Physical Therapy. So I'm in charge of serving and supporting all the physical therapy officers in the U.S. Army. Right? Maybe when I get out of the Army, I'll do a little bit more of this, and maybe I'll come back and talk about that with you. But hey, look, I'm available on social media. My hashtag or handle is @JasonSilvernail. You can find me on Facebook and Twitter or X or whatever we're calling it these days. Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube. I'm in all those places, right? And you can ask me questions, or if you want to schedule some time to talk to me, if you're in the PT community, I'm happy to serve and support you. And there's no payment stuff. I'm just here to try to serve and support people as much as I can.
Serve and support.
Yes.
And any resource of information that you recommend our listeners that want to go a little bit deeper in everything that we've been talking about?
Yeah. So for me, if you want to learn more about me and what I'm doing and where I'm located, you can go to jasonsilvernail.com. If you're interested in talking more about leadership and management, you can go to the Center for the Army Profession and Leadership, or capl.army.mil. And those are freely available resources anyone can go in and download and view, where you can see and talk about what the Army thinks leadership is and the hard work we're putting in to develop leaders who are responsive and are doing all the right things for our nation. And I think that if you're out there and you don't really know much about the military and you're like, what is all this military stuff anyway? Like, with a couple clicks at capl.army.mil, you can find a lot of leadership resources, and you can see the time and effort that the military puts into ensuring that people who are given leadership responsibility are exercising it well.
Very cool. Very cool. I'm always curious about that. So when we talked on the phone, I was like, I'm curious about a few things about your background, and I believe that more people are too, to see how the military works. And I think that's a fascinating topic to learn more about, because then englobes more things than just your professional PT side, but like growing as a person and developing all those other how you'd say characteristics are that to develop that are essential for your life. Is just like a life learning experience. It's not just about your job, 8 to 5, going to see patients. So I think that's very interesting.
Yeah, no, I think you're right on. I think the side benefit of developing your leadership and abilities is that it develops you as a person. It makes you a more mature, more humble person, and makes you more successful in your relationships and in your life. And I certainly noticed that to some degree. I'm always getting better, and there's a way to that continuous improvement, and it's through leadership and leadership development.
Awesome. Jason, thank you so much for your service, and thank you so much for being here and sharing all your experience in the military and spreading your knowledge with our listeners.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here. I'll come back anytime. Thank you so much for having me.